Hello, everyone.
Welcome, everybody.
To podcast 130.
130.
Yep. We are going to be doing a character analysis on Show Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
obviously one of the most important characters in anime.
well characterized and beloved by all. Yep. Yeah.
As you well know, he is probably one of the most popular characters in anime.
Indeed.
Not actually for his character, which is multidimensional and interesting. It is more so for his actions that he takes as a character.
Quite. Yep.
Yes.
Brotherhood is just a Show Tucker wannabe. But
Brotherhood wishes he was Show Tucker.
He really did try hard to be the next Show Tucker.
Elevators can only take you up so far. That's just all I'm going to say.
Show Tucker laid the scaffolding for the building that the elevator is in.
Yes, exactly.
It's
like in that line of epic rap battles. I can calculate the shape and the size of the mind you're using, and you're standing on the shoulders of. The Isaac Newton one
versus Isaac Newton. I thought you were going to say it was the Albert Einstein and
that one's
but
yes too. Yeah. Genius analogy, Jacob.
He keeps his family together. That's right. Yes. Is Gendo worse? No.
Gendo
Akari.
Oh.
I mean, he's a terrible dad, but the thing is, Show Tucker deserves to have that Michael Scott World's Best Boss, but world's best dad mug.
No,
that he would give to himself.
When we go into Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood as a show, it's a show that deserves, I would say, a lot of respect and a lot of recognition given to it, not just for what it is as a centerpiece for shonen anime in general, but for what it is as a fantasy series, as an actual fantasy classic style, fictional show with regards to anime. There have been a lot of anime that have come out since then where they try to do the, I would say, combining personal and large scale conflict for a dual protagonist kind of setup here. There's a lot of structural things in FMAB that just really work.
Yep.
And we're specifically limiting ourselves to not talking about FMA the original because of all the behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
That kind of, I would say, is more interesting to discuss than the actual story of FMA. Even though the story of FMA, the original, is
really good,
quite interesting.
Yeah. So how do you want to start this?
Well, let's first shout out our VIP patron, Kamai Tachi. Thank you so much for the support. Recent new addition to our VIP supporters on Patreon. Welcome, and thank you so much for the support.
We hope to see you in all the things,
all the VIP calls and such. And this is your Discord name, so that does mean you joined the Discord. That'd be awesome to have you there. But no, we're memeing, y'all. We're memeing pretty hard. We're wearing these shirts.
We're wearing the shirts. So we're memeing, but we're also kind of serious. But yeah. But so one of the things that I think really makes FMAB stand out is the fact that when I went to go watch it. Now, granted, this was back in the day of. Yes, because Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood came out so late. But it was a shonen, right? And my sort of opinions on shonen before then were the battle shonen kind of thing. But there were certain things that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood just didn't do that didn't make it feel like a shonen, even though it definitely was a shonen, right? You've got the main characters and the brash, loud protagonist that has to do something and with a very emotional drive and everything and has to fight and do all these things, but there didn't seem to be any power scaling. There didn't seem to be a lot of those other things that made me there was no filler because it was a redo, So there were just a lot of things that made me appreciate it at a time when I hadn't seen a lot of the exceptions to the rule, for shonen, because there was still the whole Bleach thing.
Yep. I would say that for me, FMAB came about 5 anime into my journey. I think I had Death Note, Bleach,
Bebop.
No, Bebop came way later.
Oh, really?
Code Geass. Because I watched basically all the kind of like I went from Bleach to all the main character is like, you know, too smart for their own good kind of stories, and I think I was just washed up on the idea of a perfect protagonist. One of the things that FMAB really sold for me quite well was that the dual protagonist setup was not only an amazing choice story-wise, but it was one that showcased the dramatic inherent shortcomings of both these characters, not only because of what they did in the premise of the story, but also over the course of the story. So I really just fell in love with the characters rather quickly, and it didn't even really become apparent to me that it was a shonen, quote unquote, until I was like actually like well through my second watch through of the show.
Oh, gotcha.
And we'll be getting into kind of things over the course of things here, but FMAB is a show that I think most everyone here, even if you haven't seen it, it's been recommended to you.
You know of it. Like, it's kind of a elephant in the room titan of sorts that you can't ignore, really.
Right. There have been a lot of people I know who went many years of watching anime before they ended up watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but it wasn't because they didn't know that it existed. It wasn't because they didn't have any desire to watch it. It was because it was like, yeah, I'll get to that one eventually. Like, that's a very big show as far as for the time that it came out, and as for the shows surrounding it, like, this was a very one-of-a-kind show in a lot of ways. In fact, the only reason it's not one of a kind is because of its predecessor,
right,
that tried to do the adaptation thing like Game of Thrones and so many others, where it's, oh no, we caught it to the source material,
and then
oh no,
sort of
anime original thing. And in some ways it's better because of it. Like, it's in some ways I would say, like, that's
the
probably,
original, or
the original is somewhat better because it didn't try to like keep up with the same thing there.
Yeah,
it was led to be free and do its own thing.
Right, like, so, because, yes, exactly. Because this was back in the day when, like, filler was a thing, right? And can you, like, and granted, FMA, the original series, definitely loops around and goes on plenty of detours and things like that.
Sure.
But it didn't ever go into, like, hard filler where it's like, all right, like Bleach style, we're in the middle of something and then let's go somewhere else, right?
It did have episodes that you could probably skip for the most part, and it wouldn't, you wouldn't lose too much of the story. And FMAB even then has probably like 2 or 3 of those episodes where it's like you could kind of skip them on a rewatch and you wouldn't miss too much, really. Centipede Senpai with the 100 bits. Thank you so much. Hey bros, I just finished all 4 seasons of Haikyuu and also your guys' reactions till season 3. So I gotta catch with your guys' reaction till season 4. Catch y'all later. Also, OP hype tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, see you tomorrow, Centipede.
See ya.
Thank you so much for the bits. Neurolisk with the tier 1 sub. Thank you so much for the sub. Appreciate it. A couple follows coming in here. Narth Andar, Cams 5792, Shiro Yasha 76. Thank you all for that. So FMAB is like one of our like kind of darlings with regards to anime because it was something we watched rather early. Now, it was probably around 5 for me as far as what show I watched, but what was it for you? Do you remember?
I don't, because I was a lot more like trying to find anime and stuff than you early on.
Right.
It was after Attack on Titan.
Oh, so you had watched quite a bit then.
Yeah.
Okay, because that does make sense. I do remember having it be a thing of where by the time I had watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, you had watched things like Cowboy Bebop.
Right.
Like, you had watched basically a lot of kind of really popular anime, and then I had basically been picking and choosing specific ones based on things that you had recommended.
Because the way it happened for me is, so the same person that got me to watch Cowboy Bebop got me to watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and for like Madoka Magica and things like that. But basically I watched and got up to the Show Tucker episode, and then once I saw the Show Tucker episode, I was kind of like, okay, that'll just be enough for today.
Gotcha.
You know. And then I didn't ever really feel like going back to it. I was like, I'll watch something else. And I didn't even realize that I was doing it because that was the last episode.
Right.
But I just kind of avoided it. And then you were like, Jacob, there's this anime that you were either watching or had like just finished, and you were like,
I think I had
amazing.
just finished it because this anime, as far as binging goes, I have 2 anime that I think I binged extremely quickly. And when I say extremely quickly, I mean like freakishly fast. I remember Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood being one of the anime that I binged well under a week. Like, I watched the whole thing super fast. Mm-hmm. And I rewatched it, I remember, within the same year after I had finished it, watching it, because I kind of wanted to take it a little bit slower and go back and check all the foreshadowing things, follow the journeys of certain character relationships a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Because I remember more so that the pacing and the plot of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was one that it rushes you through things rather quickly.
It really does.
In the first season, like the first kind of tour of sorts.
Gotcha.
But it maintains a good pace also throughout the majority of the series, other than maybe a couple episodes in like the teens, I would say. Other than that, like, I remember once I had like, you know, gotten to where greed was introduced, it was like I blinked and I was meeting Olivier Armstrong, and I was going to Briggs, and then I was already like rapidly going through with the whole twist with Scar, trying to, you know, like shift things there, and then the finale was, you know, the finale season was happening, and I was like, just gripping my seat like super tight the whole way through.
That's one of the things that really blows me away about Brotherhood, because there's the first sort of, there's like the introductory cour, right? You know, which covers a lot of the stuff from the original series. And then there's the finale, which is the last cour, right?
Right.
But those 3 middle cours, it's one of those things where it was always such a rush for me that I would never be able to pin down, like, wait, what was what episode? Like, when did this happen and when did what happen? But it just happened, right?
Like you remember everything.
40 episodes of content, and it didn't feel like 40 episodes. It felt like nothing. It felt like, you know, 8 or something. Like it was just like, all of a sudden, like you were saying, we're at the end.
Right.
Here we go.
Yeah, and I would say that as far as the enjoyment factor for me personally with regards to FMAB, it was peaked, I would say, specifically because of three main things that I think the show just kind of generally gets in terms of what it is. And these are things that I would say every show needs to have done rather well, but these are like within like the story and the characters and stuff like that. This is something I just feel like they hit really well. Was the progression of the pacing or what have you was ridiculously good. I remember at multiple points I had to, when I was binging this like late at night or what have you, I would like intentionally like pause it, go and grab like a drink that was specifically there to keep me like awake and engaged. Because sometimes when I would watch anime, I remember this was a thing before, like this is, you know, way before channel days and what have you, so I wasn't taking anime viewing as seriously even. I would just kind of, you know, just kind of watch it. I'd be like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
With FMAB, I remember specifically being like, nope, I am like really needing to pay attention here for the one is all and all is one episode. I remember specifically like sitting here and being like, this is some Empire Strikes Back, Yoda, you know, Dagobah kind of stuff there, where I'm like absorbing this, and I'm like I'm realizing that there's themes that are being set up here that tie into the whole nature of what this story kind of is. I'm like, okay. I'm in this. The actual drama and feels that the characters go through with their conflicts feel real and like weighty. One of the things that FMAB does that I feel like it'd be very easy to simplify as like, they beat that dead horse over and over again with regards to feels, is a certain impactful loss that a lot of the characters experience.
That's right.
And I would say that you could criticize that if you want, but the aspect of the choices that the characters make, having these like, I really feel their decisions, and having to like weigh the consequences of what they do really well, is another thing there. And then the ending of this anime is one of the best.
It's fantastic.
It is so well done.
Almost like gold standard in a lot of cases.
Right. For kind of the action shows specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the other things that was really important for me is that it ended.
Yep.
Because a lot of times, especially in shonen, it would seem like they wouldn't end. They would just go for as long as they could. You know, like this was coming off of Bleach, right? And it's like, yeah, why didn't Bleach end when it should have? Like, you know, like
we didn't get
when
that
it was
at the
ahead.
time,
right?
Like we didn't understand the adaptation process as much and what kind of things went into the, you know, the marketing of an anime for the manga and what have you.
So the fact that FMA exists, like the original series, it's like, yes, I'm so thankful for that, because then it means that when they went through with Brotherhood, they could just do it, you know, all the way through, not needing to pause or stop or worry about what was going to happen. Just there you go. And like, that was such a novel concept for me at the time. Like, where it was like, okay, yeah, as much as there were episodes where like they kind of all blended together, you know, it didn't feel like anything could really be taken out. Right? Like even the episodes where it was like the one with the girl that has like the legs, right? The prosthetic legs, right? Yeah, the automail legs.
The Automail City little mini arc. Yeah.
Right. That I absolutely loved that. You know, and the way it drew back to the themes, because that was also the one where there was the birth, right? Yeah. And it ties back to the whole idea of human life and what an amazing thing that is. And yeah, you know, here's this thing that alchemists have been trying to figure out for forever, and yet they can't quite do it, right? It's the way, like in the original series, there was the whole, you know, mankind cannot, you know, obtain without first giving something of equal value in return, you know, law of equivalent exchange, right?
For sure.
In those days, we believed this to be the one and only truth. But even though that wasn't actually at the beginning of every episode in Brotherhood, you could still feel that was what the entire show was about. Like I didn't actually watch the original series before going into Brotherhood, right? So it was something like I watched like a couple episodes, but so it was this new thing, but I could still feel that was all there, right? Like the idea of, yeah, we tried to save our mom, and well, apparently you're not supposed to try and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Ian Waffles, thank you so much for the 100 bits. We're not really going to be talking about FMA 2003. It's an interesting discussion point. I agree. The idea of cynical versus positive versions of equivalent exchange, but we're not really going to be talking about that here. Will there be a season 4 MHA podcast? We'll see. I don't know. But I don't know. We've done lots of discussion for MHA, which, by the way, tomorrow, MHA season 4 finale. You guys are getting a hell of a discussion in that one. I mean, this is not only an S tier MHA episode coming up, but this is like an S tier like semblance of sanity discussion with regards to how like much we went in depth with that. So get hyped. Get hyped. With regards to FMAB, one of the things that the show does rather well is its characters.
Yep.
I would say that for the most part, everyone that watches this show can probably feel my pain when they get asked, what's your favorite character of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood? Because they both know that it's probably one person, but they want to say like 5 different people's names. Like there are so many different characters in this show, and you know I'm a sucker for ensemble casts in stories, but this show handles 2 things rather well with its characters. It has a dual protagonist setup. One that is legitimate. When I say legitimate, there is still a clear, you know, main character of the 2 of them in Edward Elric. But Alphonse Elric is a legitimate 3-dimensional character with his own progression, with his own wants and needs, with his own flaws. And that is held in tandem with the same being given to Edward. So if the show didn't have a massive cast and it was a much more personal narrative between the 2 of them going about trying to get their bodies back, the show would still be pretty good.
Yes.
It would have a lot going for it. But you then get this massive multi-generational cast of characters from completely different walks of life, the whole military background side of things, the geographical, you know, political nature with people from other countries. You have not only that, you have people that are the leftovers after the genocide that happened in the war. You have not only that, you have just average civilians. You have families, you have people that have dynamics of power with their secret societies, within their their whole thing there, and that's just the characters that we get to kind of, in some ways, I would say, root for. I'm not really counting the secret society people as much, because those are more the villains, but they also made some pretty good villains. And yeah.
So one thing that I think is also very important to mention here, because you talked about the whole ensemble cast thing, right? Because that's your thing. You love those ensemble casts. I like them too. But what I like more is the personal, intimate moments. And the thing that makes this show so good with its characters, I think, is that it does both. And it does both so well.
Yeah.
Right? With Ed and Al being sort of like the cream of the crop example of that, as dual protagonists, but then also with people like Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye, right? Or Scar and his whole journey. Like there's or just Winry, right? There's so much in this show, Hohenheim, where it can shift scale, right? It can be like, all right, we're gonna do massive 13 episode finale stuff with crazy battles and all this stuff.
Yeah, well, we're not going as in depth into character specific.
And then we're going to just zoom in and see Ed and Al training as kids and sort of wondering about their whole situation. Or like
just talking about killing with Riza Hawkeye.
Yeah,
that quiet moment where she's just fixing a gun.
Right.
Like that episode is one of my favorite ones to rewatch, because it's one of the most emotionally just heavy episodes, but it's also one of the most, I would say, clever episodes with regards to having a this is something I think Western television sometimes does really well when they have an ensemble cast, is basically because they're so formulaic, they'll just constantly switch the pairings of the types of characters that you have in different dynamics, just to showcase what kind of drama comes out of it. Usually because they're running out of ideas in the story. But in anime, oftentimes you keep the pairs kind of static. You are like, Ed and Al are together. Riza Hawkeye and Mustang are always together.
Yeah.
Not so in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. A lot of other anime, I'd say, do this even better than FMAB, but we're not talking about those anime. But with this one, there's so many times where you see Al's now talking with a villain by himself. Right. There's no one else there. This is a weird dynamic here. Now we're having Greed and Edward just kind of casually talking there as friends. Now we're
Greed
seeing...
and Ling.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different, I would say, pairings in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood that are experimented with. And I gotta say, we're going to talk about her eventually, but I think that the character relationships and the dynamics between said characters is entirely something that is not unique to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but something that you can tell because of the mangaka, what's her name? Nakawa?
Hiromu Arakawa.
Arakawa, she really deftly handles the characters being put into different situations and then having the flow of each character in that scene switch and change a little bit based on who they're interacting with.
The idea that the story is an emotional one, right? It's not about whether the bad guys will be able to be defeated. Right? That's not really the issue. It's about what will the journey be? What will these characters decide? How will they reconcile things of the past? Things that will need to happen in the future? What's happening around them right now? Like the part where so after the whole Show Tucker escapade, right? One of the reasons that I think that's such a good introduction for Scar is that it's directly answering a question or a doubt or a fear that Ed and Al are dealing with in that exact moment of, we're not gods. We couldn't save that girl. Right?
Yeah.
What do? We joined the military to try and get our bodies back. But we see stuff like this because we're in the military, right? And then suddenly someone comes along and says, you use the power of God and all that stuff, and and blah,
how dare you?
How dare you, right?
Yeah.
And it's like
Crusader of Justice.
Yeah, Crusader of Justice, and it works. It works so well. Like the fact that Ed and Al do have doubts and insecurities and things like that, as much as they also have their moments of, well, more Ed than Al, of being the brash protagonist, that's like, to hell with that, right? They are still kids, and they feel like kids, in these crazy situations, and they've been given these crazy abilities of alchemy and whatnot, but they're still kids, and the people around them, the people that they're interacting with on their side and against them, are not, and will not treat them as such, right? Yeah, exactly. So things like, you know, freaking, why am I spacing on his name? But psychopath guy. I'm having a brain fart. Our favorite serial killer that gets let out of prison, the Blood Alchemist and all that.
Crimson Alchemist.
Alchemist. Yeah. Freaking.
Yeah, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're leaving me out to drown there. But
I just okay, he doesn't really interact with them almost ever.
Oh
though.
No, one of my favorite parts in Brotherhood is when I think it's him and Alphonse interact.
Right, but like Ed never interacts with Kimberly in the whole show, I think.
Maybe he doesn't.
Yeah.
But but the point is regardless of whether he interacts with Ed specifically, it's that it's an example of the kinds of serious situations that they're in, right? Mm-hmm. Al and Kimberly interacting is the sort of the climax of that theme, I feel like, in a lot of ways. But those people exist, right? It's something where the show goes into dark things, but it doesn't go into dark things for the sake of being like edgy, right? Mm-hmm. There's a purpose to it. It ties into the main themes and the questions, right?
Gotcha.
What's the value of a human soul, right? How do we deal with the fact that we have these powers, but we are still people, right? Mm-hmm. You know, what are our limitations and things like that, not just on a literal level of what they can do, but of what they will do and what they should do. Mm-hmm. You know, those kinds of things are rarely, and certainly when I first saw when I first saw Brotherhood, something that I had rarely seen actually explored in anime, let alone in battle shonen, right? So it just absolutely blew me away.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember now. Like, yeah, you're right. He had the whole arc with in the northern area of the country where he was interacting with Kimberly, and then they end up having a fight and almost dying there. Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to move things a little bit more structured, and we're jumping around a little bit. So let's focus a little bit more like specifically on the characters here. We'll kind of move our way down the list thing here. So with the characters specifically, like you have like some specific favorites, right? Like some specific ones that are like your like personal favorites. But like, wouldn't one of the best like things to kind of to bring up in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is that there aren't really too many weak points in the cast. A lot of aspects of bigger shows with large casts of characters is that there are characters that just, why are they there?
Yeah.
Why are they there? There's no reason really for them to be in this story.
And every time they're taking up screen time from the characters that you really care about, you just can't help but wish that they weren't there.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of characters in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Like, it's a pretty large cast of characters, and a huge majority of them are there to kind of fulfill a role. They're not multi-dimensional, super complex characters or what have you.
Sure.
But all the ones that get tons of screen time, all the ones that get actually like full-on arcs developed to their characters, are ones that you actually feel like connected to. You actually feel some level of connection to their progression there. And this goes to, in some level, the villains as well.
Sure.
Even the least like developed ones, the ones that have the smallest amount of actual motivation to them.
Yeah, like with some and with the villains it's tough because having them be based around the 7 deadly sins, right? That can kind of constrain their characters, right? Because okay, you know, what do you do for Sloth, right? You know, it's like, okay, he's a big strong boy, right? You know, but then you have things like wrath, right? Or greed or lust, right? And it's like and the way that they're explored within that sort of constraint of being that sin is done in some really wonderful ways.
Bayanor, I didn't even catch that you sent a bits message here. Oh shoot. Sorry, we've got some issues where our Twitch dashboard doesn't even show your message. It just says that you cheered 100 bits. So it's just Twitch being dumb. Bayanor, thank you so much for the 100 bits. Do you think any shonen will ever surpass FMAB in your eyes, like MHA or One Piece, or has it already happened? I in some ways am going to be answering that question by the end of this stream. So I'm not going to answer that right now. I am going to basically say, you'll see.
So,
you'll see.
I'll give my hot take.
But can we not answer that question right now? Just
okay.
Just in case, just kind of the thing, because that's kind of the point of the podcast is that like there's a lot of really great shonen out there, but FMAB is special, and we're going to kind of by the end of this explain maybe why it's a favorite or something like that. Or
so, okay.
I mean, I'm just like if we can, if that's
all right,
okay.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So back to the villains. Within the context of them, you end up with characters where like Seven Deadly Sins wise, like sloth or lust or what have you, where they're kind of simple characters as far as like what their specific thing is, but whenever they show up on screen, there is an actual purpose to what their angle is with the Seven Deadly Sins, and they end up expressing that in such a way that it changes the conflict to be based around what their Seven Deadly Sin is. I would say Pride's kind of the best example of that, followed probably almost, or maybe even surpassed in a lot of ways by Wrath.
Oh yeah.
I would say probably like who's your favorite of the Seven Deadly Sins? Like in a lot of ways.
Not counting greed.
Right. No. Actually, I would say in some ways you can totally
if greed
count...
is in there, then definitely greed, 100% hands down.
Well, right, but I would say in a lot of ways, let's not do greedling, if that makes sense.
Sure, but it's still something where I feel like because with greedling, it's something where you basically are forcing characters to interact with each other when they wouldn't necessarily want to, and as a result of that, you can get certain things to be brought to the surface because they rub up against each other, right? Whereas with someone like, say, Wrath, people don't usually get under Wrath's skin, right?
Yes.
Because he has such a presence and power to him and everything that if someone does something that would piss him off, they end up learning that they shouldn't have done that very quickly, right?
Or it's in such a specific circumstance where he literally could not do anything about it, so he has to just sit there and grasp his fist and like almost like rage internally.
And that's something, and the reason why I think this takes greed to a whole nother level is because that's something where those characters are essentially in an echo chamber with themselves, right? So they aren't able to grow as much because they're by themselves, right? And you usually grow from external circumstances. So in the case of greed, even taking the greedling whole dynamic, like having them be separate characters,
right,
it's still something where we're able to see these wonderful sides to greed because of the proximity to the other characters that's brought about by things outside of his control. And I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, definitely. If I had to choose a Seven Deadly Sin, I would choose greedling like 100% every single time. I just remember having this thing where over the course of the series and rewatching it, I think FMAB is the one shonen I've rewatched the most, so that might give you a little bit of a thing regarding what I like so much about it. But the biggest thing I would say about the villains is that they all kind of correlate back to some aspect of humanity.
Sure,
they all are just a representation of a aspect of humanity, so they're more thematically appropriate than they are the best characters in the story.
Right. Yep.
So Greedling is probably the most interesting because he has the combination of Ling in the dynamic with him. He's literally cheating the rules of a character by being characters, actually. He's 2 for 1, he's a combo. But all the villains have a satisfying conclusion that correlates also with their deadly sin. Every single one.
Right.
So you feel like even though their characters are not the most interesting from a character perspective, there's characters like Roy Mustang out there.
Yeah, they're not full people.
Exactly. Yeah. That is actually a part of the themes of the story.
Right. Yep.
They are not fully people. They are creations from an original person, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. And thus when they end with only their focus on that aspect of humanity being the failure in that regard. FMAB's not actually that long of a show when you think about it in the context of other shonen, but as a story, just as a story, as for what it is, it sometimes feels even shorter. I know you were talking about this earlier. You were saying that it's like, bam, it feels like 8 episodes sometimes where you just brisk through that 40 episode period
and it's
in
just
the middle
all
there.
of a sudden over.
Yeah, and it's just all of a sudden over. I feel like the main other reason why a lot of people really, really like FMAB and call it their GOAT with regards to not just shonen anime, but anime in general, is it's a pretty good plot. Like, as far as just arcing story or what have you for the general thing, like, it's pretty tight. It's pretty cohesively designed and tied up with a nice bow at the end.
Oh, definitely. The ending is fantastic with multiple different stages to the amazing moments of the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood for me where it's a great story, and yet it also is incredibly simple in a lot of ways. Like, it has the ensemble cast and everything, right? But when it comes to actually like holding to the themes of the story,
right,
it doesn't deviate from it very much. It really doesn't. And I feel like that's one of the things that makes it so special to me even after all this time.
Sure.
Is the idea that I know the kind of show it is, and it knows the kind of show that it is. And everything that it does is done as an exploration of that, while at the same time keeping it intense and action-packed and entertaining and all that stuff. And I think that's something that's really hard to do. Like there are plenty of anime out there that do just the exploration, right? The slice of life dramas and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But usually, and certainly for me when I watched Brotherhood for the first time, there was this idea that the action shows didn't really have much of that stuff, right? They were action shows. They would have crazy action, and it would be crazy, and it would be awesome. But then this show came along, and it did all of it.
Right.
It did all of it, all in the same package.
Yeah.
And in a reasonable amount of time. And I was like, how is this possible?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that that's probably the main reason that leads to rewatchability in a show. And I would say that, generally speaking, for me, when I'm thinking about my favorite stories out there, I have to be able to reconsume it. Like, I can't really call a story my favorite if I don't really get anything by consuming it again, rewatching it, rereading it, whatever. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I think I've rewatched in full 5 times. Yeah, I think that's right. And when I say in full, I mean like start to finish, consecutively, just in full there.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's been any action-focused anime
that you were able to do that for?
That I was able to do that.
Yeah, because a lot of the times for action, I feel like because there's the thrill of watching whatever thrilling thing is happening, but since you know how it goes, it's more of just enjoying the spectacle of it, and then maybe going back through the journey of why they're fighting, right? What's the purpose behind it? And I feel like that's something that Fullmetal Alchemist does really well. Like because the whole idea of, you know, Ed and Al getting their bodies back, it's not just that they have to get their body back. That would be interesting for sure.
Right. They
have to get their brother's body back. They screwed up.
Yeah.
And because of their screw up, they had to suffer for it.
Yep.
Right? And now it's this perpetual reminder where it's not that, I mean, yeah, Ed would love to have his arm and leg back, but it's, my brother doesn't have a body. He hasn't been able to eat food. He hasn't been able to like sleep, you know, like
they go into that really well.
Like he has none of that. And he did that because of me, because he believed in me, and because I was stupid. I was, you know, arrogant and my hubris and everything. Oh God, is there any way I can set this right? Yeah. And
it's good stuff. Bayonort with the 100 bits. One of my favorite moments of all time in all of fiction is when they finally figure out the father's plan. At first, when I saw the world map, I was like, the country is a circle. That's weird. And then it turned out to be actually relevant. I was like, damn, what a great show. Yeah, I would say that in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood specifically, there are a couple things where you look at the plot as a whole and you go, okay, that was some very clever use of foreshadowing. A lot of very specific little things where you're like, that was good. Well done. Yeah. I would say that specifically within the overarching narrative, and even though I would say a lot of the narrative is, like you're saying, rather simple, there are a lot of little things in the show that are usually foreshadowed by the characters. And I love that this is done so much more so than just the the visual narrative going on, what have you, in certain scenes, like just a little thing like the world map here. But the characters usually are used, especially in the first bit, because of the whole dynamic with 2003. They condensed all of the beginning bits of the story just to the very most important things, which I know some people you see as a big criticism. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But you know then that those things are all there explicitly to set up and foreshadow incredibly rewarding, satisfying conclusion scenes for the narrative. And I am here for that kind of plot. Like,
one of the things that I think is really cool about how Fullmetal Alchemist does that is that the power system that it has is both a very hard power system and a very soft power system, I feel like. And it handles that balance really well. Because on the one hand, equivalent exchange, right? You know, you basically have matter manipulation as long as you do the circles, unless you've got, you know, you can just clap your hands, and then but you can't create anything, right? You can't break those rules until you go into human transmutation, right? Which is where most of the story revolves around, because that's the interesting stuff. That's where the bad guys are focusing on. That's where Ed and Al are focusing on, right? And then it goes into this more soft power system, right? Where you don't necessarily know exactly, because what could be the value of a human soul, right?
That's the question constantly posed.
Right, and because they can never know that when it's used in a when you're taking this ambiguous, you know, fuel, right, and pushing it into a hard power system, weird things happen, right? And like the whole final transmutation, you know, like which I'll be spoiler free for any of you that haven't seen Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but if you haven't, what are you doing? You need to watch it. But the fact that it's like, oh yeah, we set up this simple issue, right? Where it's like, okay, this is the issue since the beginning, right? And oh, there's nothing literally that changes, right? It's that the character has grown and they have a fresh perspective. They've learned the lesson, right? And now they're able to do the thing, and it just worked. But the thing is that and that's something that you can do in a soft power system very well, right? But Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, it's alchemy is a hard power system, right? Except for when it comes to this area. And the fact that like it was seeded from the very beginning, that this is how the problem could be resolved, right? It's like, oh my god, that is wonderful. And the fact that it's in a direct parallel contrast to the villain and the question and the lesson that they couldn't learn, right?
Which you don't find out really about the villain until episode 40, but like in terms like the main villain or what have you. The story is not about the heroes versus the villains, really. It's about the truth. It's about the journey that this
of them as people,
this set of brothers here, like goes on to learning about the world and about life. In some ways, I kind of like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood when it's focusing less on the villains and more on the journey of these young boys trying to figure out how to grow up. And there's a lot of instances where you see these characters making mistakes along their line to growing up. Making like awkward decisions as you're like, oh, that's a tough one. And a lot of shonen, I would say, or a lot of younger kind of coming of age style stories do this thing where we learned our lesson, you know, and we kind of figured it out every episode. And you really feel talked down to, especially when you're like no longer like, 13 or something like that, watching, a shonen anime. But like you were saying with this show having dark kind of stuff with a purpose there, the themes in this story don't really talk down to you.
No.
There's a lot of points where the characters are faced with decisions where there's no easy answer to how they kind of deal with this.
They're kids that made the decision to live in the world of the adults, right? Where they're in the military, they're doing all this stuff, right? And because of that, they have to deal with all the adult stuff. They have to deal with questions like, oh yeah, so about that genocide that we did, do we want to talk about that?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, right. How do we feel about that? How are we going to? Okay, all right, and they're kids, they're teenagers, right? It's absolutely wonderful. The whole reason why the show Tucker bit, I feel like, is so kind of timeless, right? Beyond the meme factor and all that stuff, and just the shock,
the shock
that it happened,
right?
Is that here? This was the kind of the dark perspective on everything that our main characters were trying to do, right? They need to figure out this human transmutation thing. They need to get their bodies back, right? They need to push the boundaries of science, both from what is known and what people are capable of doing and what is deemed acceptable, right? And then they see this person that does that and does it in the most horrific way imaginable, right? And they have to deal with it. They have to look at it. They have to, like, it is literally right in front of them, talking to them, right? And then here they have this guy, this absolute scumbag, this despicable person that wants to kill him, and he almost does, right? And that's that. I buy that. I buy that. When there's things where it's like needlessly horrific, right? It's hard for me to get as involved in it, because how does that tie to the characters? How does that tie to the overarching story and the themes and everything, right? Is this just sort of arbitrary, like, just increase in the stakes and whatnot, so that there can be some level of response from the main character, right? As opposed to, no, this is not only an intense response for this main character because the thing is awful, but it's because it could not be worse, more pointed specifically for them, right? And that I love it.
This was literally the world slapping them upside the face and saying, like, you can't do the impossible,
right?
Don't forget that,
right? And
it's really painful in a lot of times when stories do this, but I think in our coming of age, happy-go-lucky, take down the hierarchy of the adults,
the evil organization.
Usually the adults, like, we stick it to the old guys, what have you. We're the young kids, and we know what's best.
We're gonna punch father in the face.
Right, exactly. There are times, though, where you realize that, no, it's a messed up, scary, complicated mess of a world out there, and you're only human.
Right. And that's the coming of age story stuff for me, because then it's something where they have to grapple with their own limitations, right? Because in shonen, like there's because it can be so cool to see and have it happen and whatnot, where it's the no with the whether it's fighting for your friends or whether it's because you want to go to nationals or whatever, right?
We can overcome anything.
We can overcome anything, and we'll keep working hard. We'll keep working hard, and eventually reality will bend the knee, right? Whereas in this situation, nope,
it never will.
No, that's not how it works. So what are you going to do about that?
Right.
What are you going to do about that? You don't just have some magic power that'll wipe everything away, right?
Well, and you're not even going to forget this. In fact, in some ways, they use this to the same effect that another loss is used, but I would say they use this even better, in that this is constantly a reminder for Ed and Al, and I'd say more so Ed, but of something that is a reminder to keep some of the maybe 7 deadly sins that it would be easy for him to fall into the trap of, because he couldn't do anything in this place. He was powerless. He had nothing he could do.
Right.
And I really feel like that whole scene, like you're talking about there, you're right, is so timeless, because it's not just about the way it ties in and sets up the plot or what have you, or because of the shock of it. It's really because of what it does for Ed and Al as characters.
And the fact that they reference it at the end, like I've mentioned this before at other points, but the fact that when he's talking to Truth, right? He's like, "What are you talking about? That's all I've ever been.
You'll only be human." He's like, that's all I've ever been.
I've always been a human, And who can't necessarily even save a little girl.
Yeah. There will be some spoilers in this one. Yes, there are some FMAB spoilers. We are not spoiling the hard stuff.
Right. And we're going to circle around the spoilers, kind of,
but there are definitely going to be spoilers in here.
Don't remember our exact wordage too closely if you haven't seen the show.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of wearing a spoiler on our shirts. So
okay, if you haven't seen Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and somehow you haven't gotten spoiled on Show Tucker, then that's just impressive.
That is impressive.
Like that's just impressive.
Yeah.
You're wearing art. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the story is one that weaves also this very personal conflict in between the overarching conflict. And I would say that in general, the stories and what have you that are told in there as part of the overarching conflict are ones that are kind of segmented in a lot of ways, like a typical shonen would do arcs. There are very clear, like, now we're focusing on this conflict, now we're focusing on this conflict, and now we're focusing on this conflict. And those kind of complete resolve, they move on to the next one. But I would say this is something that ties again back into the fact of how well paced this show is. There's a global story going on, a national, if you will, story going on, where they're jumping back around to different characters in different locations.
Yeah.
In a way that anime just doesn't tend to do. Like, this is more of a kind of a Western grand narrative kind of book thing, more so than a than a television show.
Like, even leaving aside the times when, like, you know, Ed and Al are in different places, or, you know, or things like that.
But just jumping over to Mustang.
Yeah, or Scar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And then the villains too.
Well, like, and with the whole tragic loss that happens, you know, early in the story.
Yeah.
And how you talked about how, like, it harps on it a lot. It does it in a really good way, though.
It does, yeah.
Because people are in different locations. They don't all know about it.
Yeah.
And the different ways that they respond because of how that person meant to them specifically is different, right? Adults will respond to somebody dying different than kids will, right? Like, you know, that's just part of how it works.
Some of our favorite scenes come out of the way that adults respond to the tragedy of specific instances happening around them. And that is one that I feel like is another thing that needs to be paid attention to. It's kind of a character thing, but it's a little bit of a story thing as well, is that in a younger kind of action-oriented battle shonen type anime, the characters that are the adults have like fully realized development that a lot of them go on that actually resolve by the end of the show. And I'm not meaning just like one or two. I mean, like, all the main ones. Yeah. Like, all of them.
Like, yeah, there's the easier ones to pick out of, like, you know, Mustang, Hawkeye, right? But then there's Hohenheim. But then there's also Armstrong, Olivier, you know, still, even though she has much less screen time than a lot of the others. You know, Scar for sure, right?
Yeah, Scar definitely for sure.
You know, Greedling, Wrath, you know, like it goes on. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think is really impressive because there's ensemble casts, right?
Yeah.
Ensemble casts, you know, again, are fantastic when they're done well.
Right.
One of the things that oftentimes just sort of happens with ensemble casts, though, is that the amount of characters you actually get intimate focus on goes very small, right? Where you have like the really core cast, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4 characters where it's like, okay, we can afford to actually give them like focus on those quiet moments, but for everyone else, and not really as much because there's just too many characters, right?
Right.
And it's not that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is immune to that because, you know, constraints of time. There's still only so many characters you can do.
Right.
But the amount that they of quality time that they give to the characters, even if they don't necessarily seem like the super core cast, is really impressive.
Yeah. I would say that you can actually look at, in general, other battle shonen for examples of how it's not easy to juggle, like you're saying there in MHA, it's having trouble juggling it, Psychronia.
Yep.
It's not easy to juggle a large cast of, you know, 15 to 20 main characters. And I would say that's maybe a little bit exaggerating when I'm saying main characters with regards to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, because it's probably more like that there's like 3 to 5 main characters, maybe. And then there's like 10 to 15, like, main side characters, right. Like important side characters.
But they're main side characters. It's not that they're like tertiary characters who randomly have like the 2 episodes at their one point where they're relevant and then they disappear forever, right?
Yeah.
Like, they actually are active throughout.
Right. And with regards to the story, the best part that I think almost everyone agrees with regards to FMAB, that is the best thing about the story, is that it ends, and it ends definitively, and it ends well.
Oh yeah.
Like all that combined, I think that most people can agree that FMAB, while it might have, some little hiccups here and there or what have you, because it's not a perfect show, but it has an ending. Yeah. And not only just like an ending with regards to the conflict so that that, things resolve at some point, but the whole basically like almost cour and a half that it gives to tying up all the plot loose ends. And I mean, as far as things go, it covers pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Like,
even with the antagonists.
Yeah, even with the antagonists.
Like, because there's, okay, ideally in my mind, with a fight, right, you want to have the actual, the action of the fight and everything, and then you want to have the stakes of the fight for the protagonist, definitely, the person that you're rooting for, but you also want to have the, because ideally you want them to be going on a journey, right? And the fight is the culmination of that journey, and maybe a final bit of growth that needs to happen within the fight,
right? That
also ties into the mechanics of the fight and them actually defeating their opponent, right?
Sure.
In an ideal situation. But then the extra cherry on top, like that, if you have all of those things that I said, that is already a ridiculously awesome fight, right? Yeah. Like that's really good. But if you want to go one step further, you make it so that the antagonist is also on a journey, and that journey concludes in a satisfying way, in parallel with the fight as well, right? Like because and the thing is that there are definitely times when stories will do something along those lines, but it usually with the antagonists, I feel like it's done in a kind of cheap way or a quick way, where it's because they're going to die or something like that. We don't necessarily need to go as in depth into their growth either during the fight or before the fight. So it's more of just you're going to know who this person is in the middle of the fight, and then that'll be resolved. But you weren't looking forward to that kind of. You didn't know who they were going into it.
Yes. So an example of this is when you have a villain that is, I would say, a really well-crafted villain. You not only see immediately their flaws and their strengths and their motivations, the things that make them a core kind of basic character, those kinds of things, but you also see that they're going somewhere, that they are not static, that they have a specific journey, and it's usually tied into their motivation, like something that they want that they don't have. When their storyline ends, you can just readdress the motivation and have them kind of look at it with usually some fresh perspective as to that whole kind of thing there. But if you didn't set up anything as to like what they had as flaws, weaknesses, contradictions, strengths, or what have you as a character other than their motivation, you just knew that they wanted this, you don't know why, you don't know what was the actual driving personal reason behind this, and usually a good villain will have some kind of personal reason behind that, even if they're more so for like they're trying to be a villain for a specific role. I'm talking like this is
genre villains.
This is the genre villain where it's the Dark Lord of the fantasy series that is specifically there to, I am the Dark Lord and I am the end all big bad evil guy.
Right.
You've seen a bunch of them.
In a lot of cases, Father is that.
He totally is that. He is perfectly a genre fantasy villain. Right.
And he kind of, and because he bears that burden, then the homunculus can actually go and do their thing.
Yep.
Right? And it does it in just amazing ways.
Yeah. And the mechanics of the story tie all the homunculus back, the homunculi, plural, back into Father in a very clever way. But it is the fact that you set up so much within the stuff that happened in Xerxes, the stuff that happens through Hohenheim, the conversations that they have, and then finally when you get the ending villain is defeated moment, that scene, that's one of my favorite scenes to rewatch in tandem with the final scene for Ed, specifically with the final. It depends on what you call the final transmutation as well. Because they each have their own final transmutation.
That is a very good point.
Well, this one is the final transmutation in what it is. Right. Yeah. But those two scenes are really good in kind of going back and kind of giving a look through, because then you realize how well the villain was done for Alchemist Brotherhood.
One of the other things that I forgot to mention is that with the homunculus, or homunculi, homunculi, they are all tied to father.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Even though it is dysfunctional in a lot of ways, they are a family, right? And on the protagonist side, we have a family, you know, albeit some dysfunction, some complications, some you know, etc. Right?
Some separation.
But it's a great way to have a bunch of characters in this group, even though they don't really seem to care about each other that much, right? As far as the why of what they're doing, right? So that you don't need to have direct specific motivations for what they want. The fact that they're kind of just helping father do father's thing,
for sure.
But they have their own way of going about it because they are the different sins and whatnot.
Yep.
It's a wonderful way to have a parallel with the main characters and have it be able to be explored it from multiple different angles because multiple different sins and whatnot.
Right. The show has so many little, like, kind of detailed things that we'll be getting into. They're kind of like our personal, like, really special things to us that kind of stand out when we think about the show as being, like, a great anime for us that we really, really appreciate. But one of the things that we don't usually talk about too much in these podcasts and stuff, because we're not people that are anywhere near kind of knowing about the this stuff in the presentation side of things. This show just does really well with a lot of these things, though, with the animation, the OPs and the EDs, the actual, like, soundtrack, the voice acting, the art, character designs, and all that. It's just quite good.
Yeah.
We have multiple moments where this is just Bones, by the way. This is kind of the show that made Bones stand out for what it was in a lot of ways. There were other shows as well
before this, but
this is one of those ones where you're like,
Bones.
It's
now sort of like their crowning, you know, masterpiece kind of a thing. Or at least
in terms of animation. No,
or at least it was for a long time.
It was for a long time. There's a lot of stuff that they've done since then where it's like, oh my god, Studio Bones.
But well, and this is another thing that I think is very relevant for the whole idea of the shonen. One of the things that was always a problem for me in my mind was that with the battle shonen, the long running shonen, you know, and it's kind of as a result of the long running aspect and all the episodes of filler and things like that. But the visuals wouldn't be nearly as good.
Nope.
Nope. It just wouldn't be because how could it be, right? Because they have to keep it going for so long, the budget just ends up getting stretched out a little bit more, right? Whereas with this show, because
there's no filler,
you have to do that. There's no filler. There's like, you know, they don't have to do all this recap time in order to pad the episode and things like that. Like,
exactly.
Like, they just have the story that they're doing, the set amount of, you know, work or whatever that they can put into that. You know, they actually have a break, I'm guessing, probably, before and after. It was able to be visually on a whole nother level than pretty much anything I'd seen before. Like up till that point. And that was something that I was not familiar with from the battle shonen. You know?
Yeah. There's definitely stuff where you're limited with regards to the designs that the mangaka created and what have you. But as for the actual implementation of it as something that we're getting to see on screen, and it's quite fun. And
also, can just shout out specifically to again. Like, I feel like it's so easy to get used to that OP and like that track, you know, because it's been around for so long. But oh my god, that is still to this day like one of the best OPs out there in my mind as far as the actual music of it. To say nothing of my two personal favorite tracks from the actual OST, like, you know, background songs of Requiem for Brigadier General and Trish's Lullaby.
Yeah,
Trish's Lullaby. Whenever it plays, like whenever it would play in the show, it was just water would just start, you know, just coming down my face. I had no idea why, right? You know, but yeah, it's a good one. That's really good. The music's fantastic. Voice acting is one that I remembered a lot of people over the course of time having a constant debate back and forth, because it was, I would say, one of the dubs that finally was worth talking about in a weird way. This is, you know, back in 2009, so it's not like there hadn't been any good dubs or what have you since then. But dubs have just, deservedly so in a lot of ways, because of, I would say, more decades past, you know, like a while ago, just had really low effort put into it. Just not really great dubs out there. Yeah. And this show has an ensemble cast. So it's very difficult to get all the dubbed characters to be done well. And I would say in a lot of ways,
not all of the dubbed characters stand up really.
Yeah, like May, you know.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the fact that a lot of the dubbed characters, quite a few of them, they put their all into those characters. They did a fantastic job. I almost can't imagine in a lot of ways Alphonse in the sub. I forgot kind of what he sounded like. I love his dubbed voice. It's so good. I love the voice acting in the Japanese one as well. There's so many great moments in the sub. They're just incredible. But there are some parts in the dub where I only watch it in the dub now. Like when I'm rewatching it specifically.
Yes, that's
yes,
right.
Bayanor.
Yeah.
Yes.
We couldn't. Well, okay. Well, so Amaju, I was thinking of Black Lagoon's dub as well. But the thing is, with Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, it was something that was in the mega popularity within anime that also had a really good dub. Like the last time the only example I could think that was before that would have been like Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop was the definitive dub for a lot of people.
Yeah,
and there was really nothing else. I think in the mainstream popularity,
mainstream, within anime. But that's really what it was. And then I didn't watch Brotherhood when it came out, you know, so I don't know what it was like within the anime community and stuff.
Right.
But I can imagine that it was kind of a turning point, in like, maybe dubs can be good.
Yeah, Armstrong's dubs.
Yes.
Like both Armstrongs, really. Like they're fantastic. I would say that in a lot of ways the sub has a cleaner overall experience. Like you're definitely going to get a more rounded experience with the sub. It's really good because there are these intensely emotional dramatic moments that the voice actors are just cutting loose. But in the dub, a couple of times they do the same thing as well.
Oh yeah,
and it's quite something.
And the dub has the outtakes.
The dub has the outtakes. Yes, a lot of people are now memeing in chat now, just like yeah.
Let's look at the door. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
I bought that shake weight you see on TV. 10 minutes a day, every day.
Yeah, like it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then I would say not only just the voice acting in that as well. I would say there's a couple things going on within the character design. While it's definitely something that you can tell what era of anime you're watching right now because of the hair and stuff like that.
Right.
Some of the aspects of automail being just included, the fantasy designs of a lot of the homunculus,
sure.
A lot of the stuff happening with regards to some of the characters that have more, I would say, outlandish kind of looks and what have you, where it's actually sometimes a theme that's brought up. I gotta give another shout out to Hiromu Arakawa because she made characters that have distinctive designs that I can really, really get into and not only enjoy, but then actually see some aspects of their character coming out in the design. And Kimberly, you brought him up. Kimberly is one of my favorite examples of that.
Oh, yeah?
The idea of him, this murderous, rampaging, ex-Crimson Alchemist, like war criminal, walking around in a tight white suit, flowing overcoat, just pure white. Like it always just made me get I both hate it and I love it.
I know that Brotherhood came out after Bacano, but original material and all that stuff. Like when did that happen? Like sure. I'm just saying. Did Lad Rousseau take a bit of inspiration from Kimberly? Like. But also these. Okay, so this first one is a very minor thing, but for some reason it just is important to me. I love the fact that Ed doesn't have crazy hair.
Yes, I
love it. It means so much to me. But the other one, and this is a really big deal. This is another thing that I hadn't seen much experience with. Like, okay, I've watched Attack on Titan. I've watched that before this. Whatever. Is how little to no fan service there is in Brotherhood. Which like. It does so much to make it so that there aren't those points where you have to be like, oh, like sort of excuse it of like, oh yes, this is an anime, so it'll do its anime thing, right? Like, it has the dramatic, animated expressions when Ed gets angry because someone calls him short, right? But there's nothing that's like really like, Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
There's one underboob bit that everyone remembers with Winry, and
But
that's basically the only fan servicey scene.
Even then, oh my god, I love that scene because it's so we're so comfortable with each other. We're we grew up together with and everything like.
Yeah, but she didn't know he was in there.
No, I know.
She does the baka, get out of here.
No,
thing.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But she done baka stuff with the wrench before. But the idea that Ed's just like he was like eating soup or something.
He was eating a sandwich.
Yeah, he was eating a sandwich.
Yeah.
Like,
right. What we're talking about is specifically the kind of things where you're introducing someone to anime that's never watched anime before. You have to kind of go, okay, so Japan has this thing.
Yeah,
and then you explain it, and then they go, oh, okay, it's not weird. Like, no, it's not weird. It's like, okay.
Well, no, it's weird, but
no, but it's not. It's not, because they're asking more. Is it weird for you? I'm like, no, it's not really.
Right. Whereas in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, all you have to explain is Show Tucker.
Right.
So
exactly.
There you go.
So within the context of the character designs and what have you, I would say that that's something that someone in chat it's a good thing to bring up. I think that the actual characters are handled in a mature way, and I'm going to talk about the humor in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. You notice that we haven't really mentioned it yet. They're handled in some ways a really mature way. Yes, Armstrong fan service. Yes, you're right.
Service.
Yes, in some ways you can tell that just a little bit. The aspect of this was a manga.
The aspects. Wait.
Yeah. Yes. The aspects. Oh. Yeah. Exactly. This was a manga written by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll note that the most fan servicey character is a male, not a woman. So
and that is a refreshing change of pace.
It is a very refreshing change of pace. Yeah.
Like, thankfully, there have been more since then that have kind of followed in that.
I mean, JoJo's is a thing.
Well,
JoJo's. Let's just drink. Let's just drink to the glorious fan service that is JoJo's. Like,
But yeah.
And JoJo's is beyond before anything that happened in Fullmetal Alchemist.
Olivier's lips are all the fan service I need.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Right. Okay, so with regards to our special personal notes, I kind of wanted to take one from chat here because it's just a great point that I just forgot to bring up. Is that I legitimately love the female characters in this show.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to every other battle shonen ever.
Let's just talk about anime. No.
I would say in anime in general, anime has so much better female characters than Western television in general.
Oh, sure.
But with regards to battle shonen specifically, for me, I love Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood's female characters way more than most other battle shonen.
Well, and when I watched Brotherhood, now granted, mostly I had seen battle shonen and things like that, and of course Revi will always and forever be a waifu of mine. But it was something where just amongst the other anime that I had seen, I was like, yeah, I like these ladies, right? Like Riza Hawkeye forever. But yeah, I mean, does that have something to do with my eternal love of snipers? Maybe. Maybe. I'm not saying, but yeah. None of the female characters that are subservient female fantasy. Yep.
Yeah, and even the one kind of childlike one of the characters that could have been kind of a little moe, like kind of blob character, what have you. If anything, she's so kind of squeaky and a little bit annoying that you kind of realize, no, she's just a little child running into the adults world from another country.
Well, exactly.
She's just got her own story going on here, and it's like,
and
what
if
do you
anything,
know?
It's that reminder that, that's right, Al is even younger than Ed, right? He's even younger than Ed, and it's easy to forget because he doesn't have a body, right? But having that kid voice, Aaron Dismuke, doing his amazing job with all that wonderful emotional range and everything. But that's important to remember. Yeah.
Oh, I've watched the dub and the sub each twice. Don't think that I'm only reviewing this from the standpoint of one side.
No, I originally watched it in the sub.
Same,
right?
Same. Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but the first time I actually watched a clip of the dub, it was what was it? It was when Mustang fought Lust. Right.
Right.
And when he was like, I nearly passed out from the pain. and Travis Willingham does a great job. But because I was going into it without having sort of like the baseline for Travis, right, as Roy, and then going into like his super gritty voice, I was like, who is this Steve Bloom wannabe? Like, no, I can't do it. It's too try hard. And then it's like, oh wait, no, it's wonderful.
You mean
I seared the wound closed.
You mean the excuse to watch FMA again? Yes.
Yeah,
if you haven't watched it in one version or the other, just do yourself a favor and watch it in the
watch
other
it in
one.
the other. Yeah.
And let it be a thing where even if it's one where you are a sub diehard, like you never watch dubs or what have you, just give it a chance, because I think that the dub isn't going to make you suddenly like think all dubs are amazing or what have you. But it might surprise you.
It might surprise
you. It's a decent dub, yeah.
Also, now, before we move on too much farther, on the whole topic of the female characters, though, I gotta say,
yeah.
So one of the reasons that I love Hawkeye, I mean, okay, y'all know why Hawkeye's amazing, right? Y'all know why Hawkeye is amazing.
Hawkeye's so good.
But one of the things that I thought was really cool here is specifically the dynamic between Hawkeye and Mustang, and how it was something where you totally shipped them, right? Like, it's like the
they
walking, right? But the way that they interact is wonderful. There's none of that crazy like because anime usually takes place in high school or with high schoolers and all that stuff. There's none of that crazy like blushing and like all that stuff. It's just they're professional, and she may choke them on Sundays, but right now they're on the job, right?
Yes, yes.
Like,
it's so true. Oh my God, he said it. He said it, not me, but I am.
But that's something that's something that especially Riza and Mustang are our parents. Yeah. Basically.
Oh my God.
But that was something that, especially when I first saw Brotherhood, and even still since then, it kind of stands out in this regard.
It does.
There aren't many couples in anime that actually do the couple thing in a way that I find admirable.
Right. Yeah. I would say that this was one of my things that kind of segues into this really well, is that I think that the relationships within the show are done rather well. And there are, I'd say, kind of three types of relationships here. There's the familial relationships. There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
They are varied and unique. And when I say a lot of them, family is like one of the key themes of this story.
Right.
Like, there are so many awkwardly, like, unique styles of families going on here. There's the literal brother dynamic. There is the nuclear family of their parents and where they're at.
Right.
There is the antagonists and how they're all kind of siblings in a weird way. There is the dynamic between the Armstrong family.
Yep.
There is the, are they getting it on? Are they not kind of family within the military?
Sure.
Not just...
Well, and then there's Mace Hughes and his family.
Yep.
Like,
Then I'm going even beyond. Then there's the cultural family of Scar and his whole people and everything.
And his brother.
Oh, yeah, and his actual brother. Then, I go even further with this. Then there's stuff like really intimate, not familial connections that become like family, like Greedling.
Sure.
It gets so extensive with regards to how much family is a thing in here, that when they go into and explore the relationships between these family dynamics, it moves you in the emotional feels. Like, it's real. There's a scene that is so not necessary to the main plot, where there's a mortician. There's specifically a guy that's not a mortician. He's more of a doctor. He was like a war medic or something like that. But he's taking care of not only Hawkeye, but he's taking care of the assassin girl who came with Ling from Jing.
Oh, yeah.
And his son reconnects with him with his new and his like fiance or something like that. And it's this really touching moment where he's like, yeah, sure, I'll put on the coffee. And it's this grumpy old man who's like completely disconnected from his family because of the guilt and everything associated with the war and stuff like that. And it's just such an excellent little emotional scene where you're going to cry potentially for a character that you probably didn't care too much about like 20 seconds earlier. It is just beautiful. Yep. Yeah, it's perfect. It's totally necessary, and this is the main plot.
Exactly.
Like there's, it was his son and his ex-wife. Oh,
gotcha.
I thought it was the son and the son's like girlfriend or something like that. I don't think it was I don't think it was the ex-wife, but okay. But point is that family is a big theme of the story. It does it really well, but in the unique relationship dynamics between the characters that have spent a lot of time together or have some pre-established relationship that you either are told or shown, they handle it in some beautiful ways. And I gotta say, like, I haven't talked about probably one of my dark horse favorite characters in this show enough yet. But they also do the mentor family relationship thing so well in Uzumi Curtis
and
her husband. Oh my god!
And the
one
wonderful,
of my
most manly handshakes ever.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
But also, yeah, how like they just love each other so much.
It's just love. Yep. It's just wonderful. It was his ex-wife. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Like.
You dropped your bear.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Okay. There are a couple things from the original series that I really wish were in Brotherhood.
Oh, yes.
And it's little things like that.
It's little things like that.
It's little things like that because they, had to sort of take as much time as possible, but yeah.
Yeah. I would say that you still should watch FMA, but we're not discussing it here because FMAB is just our preferred version of the story. Oh my god. I cannot talk enough about the relationships in this story. It's wonderful. Yeah.
And then there's Winry's whole family. Like not only does it do like the actual because it's the biological family and the family that's not family, right? Within the military and everything, but then also the idea of they took in Ed and Al because of course they would, right?
Pinako, bless Pinako and her little Spitfire heart.
Yeah.
She cares so much and yet she's constantly having to basically be their mom, when they don't have one, and
even though she's kind of their
shit talking little
Well, no, I was more talking about the fact that Winry is technically their aunt because it's basically established that Winry is the child of Pinako and Hohenheim. Or the grandchild. The grandchild. Okay, so
yeah, we can get into that whole funky thing going on there. Yeah, but that's more of yes.
Oh yeah, then the grandpa ninja and the granddaughter. That's right. Fu and what was the other name?
Yeah.
Dang it, I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember her name either. Yeah. Oh my god.
And also the second best recap episode ever, only behind Avatar: The Last Airbender. Wait.
Yeah, so
what was the recap episode?
In Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, there's an episode where Hohenheim is drinking.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes. Oh my god.
And that's where they actually introduce Father for the first time as Hohenheim.
Oh, that's Oh man,
Long time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has so many individual just great episodes that you could just do I do this with Avatar: The Last Airbender all the time. Watch these 15 episodes and you'll just get a wonderful show experience of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood if you've already seen it, of course, but you don't have to rewatch the entire show. There's so many individual ones like that where it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about this episode. This is a really good just and you have that extra context that you're bringing into it there. It's wonderful. Yep. The Bradleys, Raph, and Salim. That's a whole family. Just beating a dead horse here. It is integral. It is extremely important to the overarching narrative of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
I'm trying to think if there's
one
a way
of the best themes in the story and how it's handled.
Is there a way to make a pun out of Fullmetal Alchemist with like Family Alchemist, or something like that? Not really. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. Chat, come up with something. I don't know. I trust Amaju to come up with something cringy and wonderful. The next thing I wanted to bring up, because we mentioned themes, is actually the themes of this story. I would say that in general, a fantasy lives or dies by its themes. This is a thing that I feel like is because it's a fantasy, you expect some level of world building, right? Yeah, there you go, Amaju. Exactly. Yep. In Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, there's some pretty decent world building.
Yeah.
But it is kind of insular in that it's tied specifically to the country of Amestris, and it's pretty... There's a reason for this in the story, but it's pretty bare bones in terms of some of the creativity things, because this country was literally designed for a super secret, experiment in science so that someone can become God and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's why cities are called East, West, North, and South City, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and why it's circles. All these squares form a circle.
All these squares form a circle. Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So the themes of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood are ones that aren't as tied to the world building.
Yeah, the show is literally called Brotherhood. There's no need for family puns.
There you go.
I fail.
But there's a lot of them that are tied to the emotional journeys that the characters are going to be going on, and they use them really well. War is probably the biggest theme outside of family in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. The Holish-Valen War of Extermination.
Right. And the PTSD that the characters suffer as a result of that. Like one of the things that I really appreciated that they did in this show is that while there were... So, Ed and Al, they are the most sort of morally upstanding characters in the show. Not that the other characters aren't, but because they're kids. They're idealistic, right? They don't kill people, things like that, right? Even when maybe they should. But then you have things like, okay, yeah, Mustang and Hawkeye and Armstrong.
Mass murderers.
Yep. Yeah. And they know it and they remember it, and you know, and how they deal with it, like, and just the fact that the show went there, right? You would never know it with how they are now. You'd be like,
Armstrong doesn't look like the kind of person who was a killer.
He's the sweetest guy ever, you know?
Yep.
Like, but then that whole question...
No, they all participate in committing genocide. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, they helped commit genocide, right? You know, and that little question when they go to, you know, when Roy goes to recruit Ed, and then Winry's just like, Miss Hawkeye, have you killed people?
Yep.
It's just like,
ooh, kid,
Don't ask any more on that topic because I am afraid of scarring you for life, right? Like, you know, it's, and the way that they sort of all came together around that in the aftermath and trying to figure out how to maybe set things right and all of that, it was just,
Yeah, that is why Kimberly is such a needed and important character in the story. Is that it's not really his interactions with Ed and Al, because he does have some. Sorry for remembering that, but it's his interactions more so that with Hawkeye and other members of the military that I felt were the most memorable, because he is the one that is actually okay with everything that happened back then. He's really the only member of the military that kind of gets that level of focus there, and I don't count Fear King Bradley as a member of the military because he's a homunculi, but or he's not human in that regard. So there's that. But every main character in the military proudly walks around with their uniform on, being good people for the most part. Yeah, you remember who was Mr. Wholesome and best dad, best wonderful guy there. He participated in that. We don't see him doing it, which kind of helps us in our minds kind of distance him from that whole event there. But no, he was there. He helped, he helped participate in that. So no one is clean from this. And I love how much the show reminds us of that, to where by the time we get to the end of the show, there's a lot that they have to recompense and make, like, kind of take upon themselves responsibility wise,
because so often in stories in general, but especially in shonen, because it's showing the characters that are young and idealistic, you don't show the characters where it's a lot more complicated, where they did things that they really aren't proud of and would take back if they could,
and
but
just giving the "we were following orders" thing doesn't really fly. Like, it does when you think about, like, the fact that they're like, oh, if I didn't, I would probably be in prison or for life or what have you,
or in situations dead, where they were actually, like, maybe fighting people, but then it's still like, we're using these alchemy things, this doesn't seem like a fair fight. And then there's the, what about the kids? How do we explain that? Right? And it does it in some really wonderful ways, because it makes them feel real. It makes them feel real, because even if say committing genocide isn't something that people can relate to, we all have things that we wish we could take back. right?
Oh, sure.
Where in our lives where we did something and we're like, why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I do that? Right?
And then you live kind of tied to the guilt of that for quite a while.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And you try and become a better person as a result of it. You try and learn your lesson and everything, right? But you are not a perfect person.
Yep.
Right? And while it is wonderful to see the idealistic youthful zeal and energy of the main protagonists, having these other characters that are going to carry that weight, that's nice. Incredibly important.
Very important. Ironic Weeb, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime with 4 months. It's been a while since I last subbed. This time it was under my other moniker, Zabamafet. Oh, yeah, that's right. Hope you two have been doing good. Oh, thank you.
We have
doing
been.
great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am somehow barely surviving. I have a semblance of sanity because of my lack of being able to play Frisbee. But, you know, it is what it is. Yes, are we the baddies? I would say that this is probably the best kind of simplified version of this theme in terms of anime that I would say a kid could understand, and that is why I would say in a lot of ways this is a good anime for young teenagers to watch in general, is that they go into the discussion of the value of life. And the value, it's literally the opening every single time. But what could equal the value of a human soul? They get into that, and they get into it hard here. One of my favorite examples of this is actually in Alex Armstrong. We are told at multiple points that not only was he involved there, but he is someone who seems to be the most kind of positive military person in a like an anime way. Like it's too ridiculous. Like it's all this, let me come and embrace you, yes.
My muscles shall inspire you to recover faster.
Right.
You know.
And we're like, oh, he was with them in the war thing? It doesn't really feel like it in the same way that Hughes is kind of like that. But the thing is that we kind of separate the two because we see Hughes with a family. Yeah. And it's like, oh, yeah, of course. Alex is alone for the majority of things there. And it's like, oh, well, he's a soldier. He's just doing his thing. But when we get into his character, we start to realize that this big teddy bear, he's a broken little child still inside.
Yeah,
and oh my god, when you realize that he was probably the only person that we know of in the main cast that actively tried to not be a part of things. Like that was one of the reasons why he was disgraced, right? Was that he basically refused like orders at a certain point, right? Because there's a point where he builds the wall to trap the civilians from running away, and then he hears the shots behind as they're getting gunned down in a pit. And
then there's
after that he like left or something.
The part that always stuck with me with Armstrong, like I forgot about that whole thing with the wall. Like
that was him. So he's not seeing it, but he's hearing people screaming and dying as they're getting gunned down in a pit.
But the part where he sees the little kid, and the kid's dead on the ground, and he's just
him up,
and he picks up this little kid. And he's just, and you can,
it
like,
breaks him.
There's not even any words, like, at that point,
he's just
right?
crying.
But he's just crying, and you know, he's broken.
Yeah, you're right. He was the only state alchemist who didn't get promoted after it. So all the state alchemists that went in there became really important characters in the military. And yet he's seen as, specifically from his sister, which they have a really complicated relationship there, as being a coward and a failure for not going all the way with regards to things there. Let me remind you, he is the only character. Hughes didn't do that. He is the only character to actively resist that point in the story.
And it wasn't that he perfectly resisted.
It's just
he
that
didn't. There came a point where he was like, no more. Right? Like,
I would say that that's one of the things that people don't necessarily extrapolate as much from the story. The idea that it's like, oh yeah, Armstrong is such a good heart. But it's the thing of, wait, he's the only one that's mentioned to have done this. Hawkeye was a sniper. Going around watching people in her target reticle. Dead. 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 Like, it's just some chilling stuff. And then the whole story revolves around the idea that there's this mechanic within alchemy where you can manipulate the life of people, their life force, their soul, and use it as a resource, as energy to do extraordinary things. And constantly throughout the show, the brothers are presented over and over again with the opportunity to potentially solve the whole plot.
Right.
Over and over and over again. But because we know how much they value human life with some very dramatic things that they set up in the very beginning of the show,
right,
that there is no way they will ever use the thing that they planned to use in the beginning of the show for this, to save themselves.
Yeah, Mustang burned people alive. Yep. That's like, isn't there a point where at some point he comments on the fact that he can still smell the burning bodies?
Right.
Like that was something that stuck with me.
Oh. It's a really cool way to pull us, I would say, almost in a kind of a shocking kind of reeling back thing out of the story, because we're experiencing a visual medium and an auditory medium.
Right.
So we're not thinking about smell. And then when he does that, we're like, yeah. I remember that line. That was one that shook me as well. But the value of human life is something that is a huge theme of the story. And it is at the very end, you realize that they did find a way to actually do this without using human life.
Right. One of the Psychronia mentioned something really good a while back. It's
okay.
Way far up, but that the moment you're in too deep when you can't explain it to a child. That is a great way of saying it, and that's really kind of what it is here. And the thing is that they think they can explain it just fine, but then afterwards, once it's over, they realize, no, I couldn't explain it to a child. No, oh my god.
I like also though that, to tie back to one of my favorite scenes, is that she eventually does explain and give the details of the or Ishval's extermination to Ed at a later point in the show. And it's kind of one of those moments of like, okay, I can do this. And she's not explaining away kind of the actions of it. She's just kind of recounting it. And it's probably one of my favorite like little backstory elements, because we had already seen a lot of the things that she was showing, or that we were seeing through this. Like we kind of knew a lot of the things that had happened, because there's Scar's stuff, there's Kimberly's, there's Roy, there's May's.
Kimberly especially.
So we kind of knew a lot of this, but we didn't kind of get her little unique perspective on things, her bird's eye view, if you will.
Right.
So that was an incredible thing. The other kind of, I would say, really cool triumvirate combined theme here is that they combine religion, science, and truth all into one like revolving philosophical question exploration. And I think it's handled actually in a quite mature way for a for a shonen, for an anime that's more focused on the action and kind of the emotional character drama.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yep.
I would say that it's something where you can't really get like the idea that the mangaka was trying to push some specific message onto things, other than the aspect of the truth angle, the idea of the characters specifically needing to actively be involved in building their own relationship with the truth, basically.
The two things that I thought were really, really cool that this show did that a lot of stories don't do is the whole idea of with the Ishbal and War of Extermination and everything, dealing with the idea of having main characters that kill people or have killed people, and what that means and what that does to you as a person, right? Because
is there redemption for you?
Yeah, and because I feel like a lot of stories gloss over that, like especially whenever it's like, oh god, like whenever it's something where it's like, oh, there's some dystopian regime, right? And we know that the person at the top is an absolute psychopath scumbag,
right?
Therefore that means that all the people that
we kill on the way to get to them, completely justified.
Completely justified. Yep. Because they're all just the same, right? And in fact, in order to make it easier so that this question doesn't have to be brought up, we'll give them identical uniforms that cover the face, right? Because they're not people, right? Like it's the stormtrooper thing. It's the every single time, like where it's like, yes, Katniss, keep going. It's just good stuff right here. Yeah, this is wonderful. And it's not even addressed. It just bugs me. So the fact that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood did this really well and caught that duality of the kids that won't kill and then the veteran soldiers that did kill.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
that whole balance, like that just worked really well.
Right. I would say that this is one of the best things that the show almost actively points at in the final bits of the show is they unleash the Immortal Legion. Mm-hmm. And they bring up the idea of, oh yeah, you thought this story wasn't going to have that at some point? No, we do. But we're going to make it the most horrendously disgusting abomination of a thing where you're realizing, yeah, this is not only what we'll do, but this is what we're going to make you kill.
Well, and
they can't even kill them. So it's just these writhing pieces of suffering and horror that have actual human souls attached
right.
to
That's
them.
That's the thing. They're immortal. That doesn't mean they're not people. It's just a tortured, different version of it, right? And then the other thing is the idea that the power is not the end all be all.
Right.
A lot of times when there's stories with superpowers or whatever, right? That is the thing that's sort of lifted up and praised, right? Whether you're talking about Marvel movies or like a lot of times in some of the Battle Shonen things that I'd seen, there it would always be the focus on the power. How do you get the power in order to defeat the bad guy? The power, right? Mm-hmm. It's that same kind of reason why I think Lord of the Rings has stood the test of time so well beyond just Tolkien's amazing world building. It's not about the elves and the dwarves and everything in the orcs and all the crazy battles. It's about the hobbits, right? It's the thing that people oftentimes leave out. Mm-hmm. And I think that the fact that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood brings this in on a fundamental level with the whole equivalent exchange and human transmutation,
right?
But then also with the final resolution for the main character, and that's the decision that the villain wasn't able to make, right? That's just
it's just
yes
chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I was just going to say, I know.
Amaju's been like excited there. The final kind of thing that I want to say about the show in a way that I feel like is a little bit contentious here is that the show falls into, in my opinion, a couple of the traps with regards to how it handles humor. And that is that the humor most of the time lands. Like most of the time it does. But there's a lot of times where they do the tonally jarring, like, anime face thing to shove the humor in your face. Sometimes it's actually really great.
Yeah, sometimes it works great.
But I would say that
not always.
In a lot of the ways, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is funny and is genuinely quite funny is when they own into it with regards to the scene as a whole. Here's an example of, I would say, where the humor in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is wonderful. There's a bit where the Armstrong siblings are fighting against the homunculi. Mm-hmm. It's really tough. There's no way they can beat this thing. But they're soldiering on through it. No pun intended.
Gritting their teeth. Brows. Yeah.
It's still not enough. Mm-hmm. And then a giant alchemy fist comes through, absolutely destroying the homunculus in question. And Izumi Curtis and her husband come out, and they're just like, all right, yes, we're here, and we're here to end the fight completely. And then suddenly the whole scene takes on a comedic kind of excitement, kind of silly one.
And we've got the handshake.
We get the handshake. And the whole scene is built up with wondrous, I would say, comedy within the bit there. But they had to change the entire tone of the scene with the fist before they could bring in the comedy, because it was a scene where you were worried beforehand that one of the Armstrongs was going to die. Right. And I'll just say, as far as the threat of character deaths in this show, while you can definitely tell over the course of the stories that there's a bit of plot armor involved at certain points,
and give the tertiary characters the deaths,
yeah, exactly. There are moments where you are very legitimately worried. Oh my god, there's nothing to stop them plot-wise from killing this character.
Meat person, like, what are you going to do to this immortal regenerating thing?
Right.
Like every time, definitely a part of this is because I love Hawkeye, right?
Yeah.
But every time that, like, Hawkeye, like, is like, all right, I have to fight a homunculus, and it's like, you only have so many bullets. You have a lot of bullets, but eventually they will run out. And what do you do then?
Yeah.
Or just last specific shout out. In the fight with Lust, before the fight with Lust, when you have so on multiple different angles.
Yeah.
One, when Hawkeye thinks that Mustang is dead. right? That whole scene is fantastic.
That scene's amazing.
But then Alphonse, the fact that they brought up that someone who previously was, yes, an enemy, got killed inside of him.
Yep.
Right? They're dead. They went from a living body to a dead body inside of him, the blood all over his armor and everything. He's still a kid. That is traumatizing. So then he's like, no, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to help. Even though in this situation, like, him being armor doesn't actually save him.
Nope.
And that shot where he gives his final line and then with the cuts on the armor and everything, like,
yeah. What does that have to do with humor, though?
Okay, no, it has nothing to do with humor.
Okay.
It's all, no, it's the thread of character death. That's
so you're
thread of character
that.
death.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So I would say that in general, the show hits with the humor. A lot of the jokes are really good. A lot of the moments are quite good. Some of the running gags get a bit repetitive, but I would say even so, I wouldn't discredit the show as being one of the best just because of the humor.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of little things I would say that we just kind of wanted to make sure kind of got mentioned here. Specifically, there's a thread of plot running through the story where Roy Mustang wants to get revenge. And it's probably one of the simplest but most emotionally satisfying in the conclusion little subplots running through the story that I think everyone can agree that the final sequence of scenes for that plot's conclusion is one that you want to watch both in sub and in dub. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
It's quite satisfying.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Other shout out, I would say little subplots is particularly everything that goes on with Hohenheim. Hohenheim as a character is one that's largely absent. Fathers. But for the most part throughout the series. But when he's brought back into the series, there's a different kind of tone that he brings into the show whenever he's in a scene, because usually he's by himself still. Like, he's not really with that many characters. But the way they handled his character in how it combines with Father as a plot, as a subplot within things here, I really liked that in combination with the Xerxes backstory, which was very cleverly little, foreshadowing done in the earlier parts of the story. I mean, really earlier parts of the story. But yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Wait. Amaju, you're saying you guess you should watch this? Are you talking about FMAB? You haven't seen FMAB? Bruh.
Huh.
Bruh.
Yeah, you need to fix that.
What is this? I posted an FMA related drawing on #art on Discord since I can't show it to you here without the
without mods.
Okay, gotcha. It's in the vein of what I did for Jacob on the Thursday stream.
Oh my.
Cool.
Oh my.
Awesome. I will check it out for sure.
Badass points to Hohenheim for memorizing 500,000 names. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. People don't get why Hawkeye let Mustang go nuts against lust, but not against envy.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. Like why people have a problem with that, because, well, one wasn't revenge, one was.
Yeah.
One was a defense thing. One was, let's exterminate this creature.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. I think that confuses me on like a number of levels, but I guess
because she didn't have a problem with the fact that Envy had to die. It's
right.
that with the way you are right now, you should not be the one to kill him.
Right.
She's like, I'll kill him. It's fine. Yeah, because he does need to die. Just not like this.
I would really be surprised if there were actually that many people that saw that as a problem. I don't know. I'll just say I really like watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood reactions in general. Like there's one of those shows I actively love rewatching, so therefore I like going back and seeing other people react to it. I would say that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is a show that you can really get like great reactions out of, especially if you get invested in the characters. But there are occasionally a couple times where I'll see people not really get invested in the characters and they're just there for the plot, which I know there's no real separation between the two. The characters are the story and all that. But I've never seen that one. I've never seen that kind of weird interpretation. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the topic of the previous question.
Oh, yes.
So do you think that any other shows will ever, or any other shonen will replace Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood as your favorite? Have any already?
Right.
You know.
So this is the thing that I feel like needs to be kind of talked about within the context of FMAB and what it kind of means in the current I would say a stream of anime that's just been constantly coming out for the last decade since Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood came out there. So, yes, your question, Behanord, exactly. So, I would say that a lot of people, since Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has been sitting at the top of things like my anime list for, so long, it got basically scrutinized to the point where people were like, it's not perfect. I found plenty of flaws in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's now an accepted take to show that the first core of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is garbage in terms of pacing or what have you.
It's still great.
Yeah. It's a thing where I have found this to be more the case in the thing of where it's like people oftentimes will be like, my opinions are allowed to change on things, so therefore I don't see Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood as the greatest shonen ever anymore. Yes, absolutely. I don't know actually what would be the greatest shonen, because I haven't watched even that many shonen actually when all things are considered there. But as far as what it is, as far as a fantasy kind of genre style specific, kind of a Avatar The Last Airbender kind of equivalent but darker for anime, there's nothing else that really comes close to it in my opinion. I would say in a lot of ways the closest thing to it hasn't ended. That's probably Hunter x Hunter. And I would say in a lot of ways Hunter x Hunter is just a completely different style of show. Like think of all your shonen, battle shonen kind of things out there. How many of them have actually ended and are actually a kind of a a fantasy, style fantasy style show like that? I don't know really any.
Yeah, like for me,
like
is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood the best shonen out there? I don't know. Maybe, yeah. Maybe not. But here's something that I can say about it. What is really amazing about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood for me is that it's not that any specific thing that it does, like, you couldn't necessarily find somewhere else, right?
Right.
Like a lot of the things, like dual main characters, emotional core to the story, things like that, right?
Yeah.
A cool hard but sort of loose power system at the same time that ties into the themes of the story really well. Like there are other stories that have these kinds of things, but I don't think I've ever seen one that has all of them in the same package,
right,
and has them fit together so tightly and so well. And I don't think there will be another show that does that.
Yeah.
Right? Like maybe there will be, and if it does happen, great. And there are other shows that do their own special thing better than any other show, right? Because that's what makes that show unique, right?
Right.
Like totally, right? Like I could tell you like with One Piece, there's amazing things in One Piece where it's like there aren't other stories currently that do this thing as well as One Piece does. That's what makes One Piece One Piece.
Exactly. I gotta say, One Piece in a lot of ways has a lot of the things going for it that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood does really well. One Piece has so far subverted so much of my expectations with regards to how battle-focused it is. It's not actually as battle-focused as I thought it was going to be.
There's a part of me that wonders if Fullmetal Alchemist actually referenced some things from like certain other stories, like say One Piece, as a result of this, right? Like the fact that there isn't really power escalation per se,
Well, there kind of is, but not
really.
Not really. Yeah.
No.
Okay, so you would say Suiruran Gintama, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, and FMAB are the contenders for me. Those all sound like great best shonen of all time ever. I would say that there's no problem with calling any of those shows, because I don't even know anything about Gintama, but I know based on reputation alone. I thought it was a comedy though, but yeah, like those all sound like wonderful choices there. I would just say that for me, the reason why FMAB is special, the reason almost entirely as to why it's special, it is because it is a tight, complete package. There is almost no shonen out there right now because of either it's so dang popular, it's just going to keep going forever, or because there's so many cool arcs and stories we can tell in this world that why would we stop?
Right. Yeah. Like the main contenders for me, sort of along this, would be like, okay, well, you've got JoJo's, you've got One Piece, you've got Hunter x Hunter, you've got My Hero Academia. Wait, none of those are, and One Piece. Wait, none of those are over. Huh.
Yeah. In some ways, what I kind of want to bring up here is that there are arcs within shows that rival Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and in some ways might even be better. Even be better. Right. But as far as telling a compact, complete narrative and ending it,
it is a travesty that there aren't more.
There
shows
should
that
be
do that,
more like this.
Brotherhood, right?
Be comfortable with ending your show at episode 64. God, like, this is, if anything I could rant about anime, this is it. I understand that you need this anime to sell more manga. But I feel like some mangaka maybe need to have the stones to just end their thing and just be like, here it is.
And granted,
it's done.
Right, and granted, with the kind of stories that they set up, like for instance, One Piece. One Piece is set up in such a way so that it is naturally going to take a long time to finish. JoJo's is set up so that it naturally doesn't really ever end. It ends, and then you redo it with another JoJo, right? And that way it can sort of keep going with still having end periods, right? And Hunter x Hunter is all about exploring the world and everything, and that, it could just go on forever, right? So within those stories, maybe it wouldn't necessarily make sense for them to end, right? Or certainly not for a long time, right?
Gotcha.
But with Brotherhood, it's something where, it was set up on a story where it will have a concrete ending, and that's probably one of the reasons why we compare it to Airbender so much, in addition to just the fact that it's done really well.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, Bayhanor, I totally get it. You don't want One Piece to end. I want it to go for another decade.
Oh,
Thank you so much for the 100 bits. There are stories where it's like that.
Yep.
Hunter x Hunter, when it ended, I was like, well, crap. Now I want another 5 arcs of Hunter x Hunter. When they basically, this is, I think, actually probably the ballsiest thing. Probably it's just because of the fact of how much it was a hiatus show, or something like that. But the fact that it ended with essentially the world opening up, and Gon and Jing basically having this moment on top of the world tree and looking out at the world and basically being like, this story could be just beginning right now. That is the most satisfying way to have it end. But the knowledge that that's not actually the end of it.
That's in a lot of ways the best, truest ending that it could have, because then it can just keep going in your imagination or in reality or whatever. But that is the show. So it's not, in a lot of ways, it's not going to have an ending,
right?
Kind of,
Yeah.
Because that's not the kind of story it is, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that and that totally works.
It totally works.
But there is something so special when it sets out and there is an ending in sight, and it does it on its own terms, and it nails it, and it's just.
And so that's why I would say personally for me, because I'm not wanting to make a definitive statement about how the show is overall, because I can't. I don't have any basis to do that.
And
Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is my favorite battle shonen because of the fact that it tells a narrative, and not only does it end it, this could totally change. My opinion could totally change. I saw someone saying up there that Demon Slayer is apparently going to be a pretty short shonen, all things.
And that kind of makes sense given awesome. How the pace has been so far.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to watching more of that. There's a lot of shows we still haven't watched and finished or gone through as of yet. But for me, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood will probably only need to be revisited with a rival when the the anime in question actually has its ending. In some ways, there's a show that I've been watching for a while, and you guys know this, and I'm very much excited to see how it ends. But one that's probably going to be a while before it ends, and that's Haikyuu. Haikyuu, for me, has a specific kind of personal thing that it does for me that I absolutely love. It's a completely different style of show than Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. But if Haikyuu ends in a comparable way and how well it does go for like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood did, that could be a potential rival as far as my personal favorite shonen, so to speak. But it is a sports show, so it's a different
kind of animal.
There's a lot of other things I would say going for Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood that need to be kind of pointed at here, is that I'm a sucker for fantasy ensemble casts with a personal narrative weaving throughout the larger narrative, and then also the fact that there is a dark undertone to the world building stuff as it goes. So it hits a lot of the like special little things for me.
Like having a creative sort of power system world kind of a thing, an aspect to the magic. So it's not just like, like all the isekai that come out where it's just, here's your D&D character with this
we referenced that magic spell thing,
Right.
It's funny because actually a lot of people in Discord were saying, sorry, so a lot of people in Discord were saying, like, you guys are making a bunch of references to a thing that we don't really get with D&D and stuff, and I'm like, you're right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So in a lot of ways, isekai kind of doing the thing of like, look, references, we are topical and stuff, and it's just like
that gets old.
That gets old. You're creatively bankrupt. Please,
like come up with new jokes. That's one of the things that's really cool. Like again, the similarities with Brotherhood and Airbender is bending. There you go. It's simple. It's creative. You can. It's interesting and fun to watch.
Right.
But you can also do different kinds of things with it. And since the story is going to end at a specific point, you don't have to worry about it getting boring, kind of, because you only need to have as much exploration as you have story. So there you go.
Check out Villainous Destruction Flag. What is that, Cyclone?
I have no idea.
Never heard of that. Oh wait, I've actually begun to understand more D&D terms through you guys. I believe it. That
D&D
makes
is
sense.
great.
D&D is wonderful. Not every show has to keep going and going. Like some shows you want a good conclusion to, and others you'd watch the characters do anything because you love them and the setting so much. Shiro Yasha, that is literally the combination of what is, I would say, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and Haikyuu for me.
Oh, sure.
I love the fact that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is just there. It's done. It's finished. And in some ways it's because I've watched it probably so many times that it is my favorite for me for action, shonen action stuff. But Haikyuu, that's kind of that other one there where, I'd watch them go to the mall and hang out. Like, I don't really care what they're doing. I love these characters so much.
And here's something I'll say. In the case of Haikyuu, I definitely want Haikyuu to end. I want it to have a definitive ending. I would also love to see spin-off series of, and this is our lives after. Like they did the thing, they won nationals or whatever it is.
Even though that kind of would be the equivalent of like money grabbing,
Oh, sure, but but it's like, why not, right?
You're like, because they're money grabbing me, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, exactly. Because then
take my money.
Well, no, but the reason why is because then
I'm with you.
It's optional. It's saying we ended it. It's over. It's all good. If you want to have other stuff that isn't ripping it open again, right? But it's just it's just fun continuations, right? So you can still get more of it. We'll do that too. Yeah.
Gotcha. Like Cronies, as I mentioned it before, it's an isekai that does something new, like popularize a whole new isekai subgenre, sort of new. It's really fun. Oh. Okay. Sweet.
Gotcha.
Vinland Saga. I don't know.
I think that it's more of a seinen.
Yeah, I don't put Vinland Saga in the same kind of range of things because, okay, I would say that
it's got the high school aged protagonist, but like that's about it.
I would say that there's too much character study going on with the side characters for it to be a. And I know this is the whole shonen is a demographic, not a genre whole thing there, and I'm like, Yeah,
but that's the thing.
I get it, but
I don't think the demographic, because shonen as a demographic is 12 to 15, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Vinland Saga, nah,
I don't think 12 to 15-year-olds really.
Nah. There are definitely a bunch of 12 to 15-year-olds that would enjoy this, but that's not the target demographic in my opinion.
Yeah.
Shonen is a point of view, Anakin.
Yeah. Main character is reborn into a pre-existing role in a story and needs to avert the canon plot because things won't end well for her.
Oh, nice.
That's interesting. Okay. Huh. Mob Psycho. If Mob Psycho has a good ending, like please give us Mob Psycho season 3.
Right, yeah.
That could be also one of my contenders as well.
Yes, and right, because it definitely is one that is staged to have a definitive ending.
Yes.
Right? You wouldn't want Mob Psycho to go on forever. It's a great show. I love the characters, but it's one of those shows that needs and deserves a definitive, concrete ending.
Hey, another Bones show. What do you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
what
true. Do you know?
Domestic Girlfriend. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, y'all. We're going to be ending the podcast right about here, but
as soon as I mentioned Domestic Girlfriend.
Yep, exactly. We're ending it right there. But y'all, this was a really good discussion. I'm really glad we got to do this. There are a lot of shows out there that we reacted to. We didn't react to. Because of the fact that we were anime fans long before the channel. We weren't necessarily the most cultured of anime fans where we knew everything. I mean, he was maybe a lot more so than I was. But the fact that there are so many anime where we didn't get to discuss these things with you guys, we'd like to use the podcast as a vehicle, as a means by which we can go into them and talk about them really in depth, even though you don't get a lot of the excitement and hype of us
seeing how we responded to that one scene for the first time. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
But thank you all for hanging out and checking out the podcast here. For those of you that are first time here on Twitch, we do 4 streams a week: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Mondays we do our podcast discussing stories, anime, maybe just hanging out, chilling, what have you. On Tuesdays we do a One Piece manga reading, which 1 volume per week. It's ridiculously fun. We go into voices and it's hilarious. Have fun with that. It's really cool. On Thursdays, Jacob does his gaming stream where he's going solo on Yakuza 0.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. And then on Fridays, I go solo on a gaming stream, which currently I just finished Bastion, a game by the indie developer Supergiant, and now I'm going to be moving on to Transistor next. It's going to be a lot of fun. So leave a follow if you want to stay up to date on all those things there. Sometimes there are surprise streams. I was doing surprise streams for the Jedi Knight Fallen Order game. Had a bunch of scheduling complications, so it's not actually been working out thus far, but there could be some more there. So if you want to stay up to date, again, follow. If you want to have Bezos give you some of his money, give us some of his money. Yeah, because we want all Bezos' money. Twitch Prime is the thing, I'm pretty sure. You know, if you just have it floating around, you want to use it on someone, you get a cool magnet and access to our Discord.
Indeed.
So you can chat with us more about stories and anime and stuff, meet the community there. It's pretty fun.
Stories with definitive endings even.
Oh my god,
for instance, my sci-fi novel, Battle Lines. It's on Amazon, link in chat.
Yep.
Go get it.
Yeah, exclamation BL. So pretty legit. And we got a Twitch Prime sub, Dextron or Daystron XD. Thank you so much for the Twitch Prime. Welcome to the Magnet Brigade. No, there is no Battle Line sequel. It has a definitive ending.
That's right.
Concise story. Go check it out. Yeah. Shiro Yasha 76 with the Twitch Prime. What are we gonna start a hype train accidentally
at the very
end of the stream? Oh no, we must end it to save everyone. But thank you so much. Make sure to sync up your Discord and Twitch accounts so you get access to our private Discord. And check you all in the next one tomorrow. One Piece. One Piece. So we'll see you all in the next one. All right.
So
that's true. There are fanfics on Discord.
There are fanfics on Discord. Yes. And that was one of the things where I wanted it to have a definitive ending because I was always so frustrated, especially with books, because then it'd be years or more, if they're ever going to get the sequels, and it's just awful. But someone pointed out something. I think it was Amaju. Of course, it would be, but that Mob Psycho, Studio Bones. Well, now Alchemist Brotherhood, Studio Bones.
Right.
Would Domestic Girlfriend potentially be able to be on that list too? Now, because it's not Studio Bones, but like I think a bone analogy could be fit in there somewhere.
The only bone analogy
it might be a bit of a tight
is
fit,
the
but...
armor boner that you have in battle lines.
That's right. Yes, I love armor. I love armor so much, and snipers. But
and the armor is done in such a family dynamic kind of way.
It is indeed. It is indeed. It's pretty hardcore. Yeah. My particular favorite